and welcome to a class on world classics. I shall be dealing with Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. But before moving on to Hermann Hesse, let's have a look into his life and works. Hermann Hesse was born on 2nd July 1877 in a little Swabian town of Calw in southern Germany. His Swabian and family background seemed to predestine him for an innate understanding of the East. His father, Johannes Hesse, and his mother, which is none other than the daughter of Dr. Hermann Gundert, had served many years in Protestant mission stations in India. His maternal grandfather Gundert had worked a quarter of a century or so on the first dictionary of Malayalam language. So he has a close affection and a close connection with India, especially the South. The resolution at the age of 13 that he must become a poet or die produced a painful collision with the authorities and systems, and resulted in a conflict with his parents and teachers as well. In 1892, he fled from the Protestant Theological Seminary in Melbourne and became, he ran away from the seminary. After being expelled from high school, he worked in several bookshops for many years. He began his literary career as an aesthete and wrote many romantic poems. His first novel, Peter Commonsind, shows a great influence of Tolstoy. Hesse's visit to Singapore, Java and Ceylon in 1914, which is often characterized as his journey to India. In fact, he never came to India. That is very important. But this visit to Singapore, Java and Ceylon was an important landmark in his life. He met some of the people of Indian origin in the countries he visited. But this visit was also a disappointment to him, as he failed to see the Indian dream world which he had in mind come true in those countries. However, his belief in the basic values of Indian thought remained intact. Robert Again, a story written after this journey, was a turning point in Hesse's response to Indian ideas. In this story, for the first time, the common goal of all religions is stressed. Hesse left Germany in 1912 and settled down in Bern, Switzerland, and in 1913 he published his impression of the journey to Southeast Asia under the title Out of India, Rochalde in 1914, and Knulp just to be pronounced Knulp, Knulp, these are two novels which represent the opposite poles of tension he experienced during these days. The artist in his Rochalde, Veragut, is totally involved in domestic joys and cares. Despite an empty marriage, the painter's love for his son imprisons him within the walls of his idyllic estate, Rochalde. The vagabond, on the other hand, the vagabond Knulp, also an artist, has the loneliness of those who will go their own way and he wonders if he would not have done better to conform to the established orders of things, becoming one to the settled folk with wife and children and the comfort of home. But in the end, we see that it was not Knulp who chose wrongly, but it is Veragut. Okay, Knulp is a vagabond, and he doesn't care for all this settled life. And Veragut, on the other hand, in Rochalde, he suppresses his passion in his life. In fact, he sacrifices his love for his son, even though he's having an empty marriage. His marriage is almost on the verge of there is a marital discord there, but still he goes through all that only to be all only for the love of his son. So in the end, we see that it was not Knulp who chose wrongly, but Veragut. So there is a contrast of these two characters in Rochalde. These two opposite poles are shown, and their experiences, and in fact the philosophy of life as such. During the First World War, Hesse joined the army, and it was in anti-war activities. During the First World War, Hesse joined the anti-war activities, and he edited 2 newspapers for German prisoners of war. And it was during this period that he had personal problems also. His first marriage broke, and this is reflected in the novels Knulp and Rochalde. In both these novels, his broken marriage is depicted. Reader Siddhartha, no further misunderstanding was possible. The Indian locale at once removed Hesse from the contemporary European realities and forced him to come to grips with the existential problems. The need for self-fulfillment is given poetic form and meaning in this novel through Hesse's personal interpretation of Buddha's myth. So let's now slowly get to the novel. In fact, before we move to the elements or the chapter wise summary of Siddhartha, let me just give you a small hint of Siddhartha's oriental or his in his relation with Buddhism, his relation with Hinduism, his relation with India as such. In fact, his relation with existentialism as such. Okay, Oriental Renaissance, which began in Germany with Schlegel and also Schopenhauer, had turned into a fashionable cult by the mid-19th century. And in the time of Hesse's own childhood, it was accelerated and intensified by the reaction against the pseudo-scientific things of the naturalist school. This interest was this interest was disseminated in popularized form to thousands of readers in many languages by Count Hermann Kesserling, whose travel diary of a philosopher gave an account of his trip around the world in 1911 and 12, as well as an introduction to the mystical thought of the East. The Orient became a popular province for all those who sought a philosophy of unity and totality to offset the fragmentation of existence produced by the scientific and technological progress of the West. It was a time, remember, it was a time of these wars, the world wars, and the modernist period where it was all fragmented, the whole world was fragmented, and people were disillusioned. It was a time of scientific, technological progress where they sought, uh, they were craving for a place of solace. No religion could give them solace, and they believed slowly the whole world was being taken over by science and technological progress. So here, through this attitude of, or they were trying to bring in some sort of order in this chaotic, fragmented world. Many of them sought to the philosophies, the mystical philosophies of the East. And remember another thing, it was also a period of colonialism, and therefore the Orient was being presented to them in a different form. The Orient was something of awe and wonder. It was a place where the philosophies, the mystical thought of the East could bring in solutions to the problems. India was a goal for Hesse, towards which he had been long striving. In many of his stories and essays, he told of this childhood surrounded by the objects that his grandfather Gundert, Hermann Gundert, had brought back from 30 years of missionary work in India. India was one of the most influential conditioning factors in Hesse's childhood. Hesse's conscience and intellectual interest in India came first from a study of theosophical writing, all of which led him back to the same sources, in particular the Bhagavad Gita. He became acquainted with the work of Hermann Oldenburg, Buddha, Paul Deusson's 60 Upanishads of Veda, and Carl Eugen Newman's Sermons of Buddha. Schopenhauer, whom he began now to prefer to Nietzsche, merely confirmed for him the significance of Indian ideas which had already found elsewhere. The journey of 1911 to Malaya, Sumatra and Ceylon was a severe disappointment to Hesse. It ended for him that realization of the East in which he was seeking to escape was not found. Hesse found the Orient Europeanized and having its own momentum of degeneration. Though he was repelled by this, Hesse's attitude remained ambivalent. At least in the East, he found a bond of ideal community together with some contact with magical source, and he harps upon the need for Northern European to rediscover such things in his own culture in a higher form. What he brought back from his trip was deep reverence for the spirit of the East, whether it is Indian or Chinese form. And Hesse never went to India, okay. It was all from the Indian friends that he met in Malaya, Sumatra and Ceylon. But he was disappointed. The India that he had in mind was not found in their culture, in these friends whom he met. He found that they were all Europeanized now. Their culture of India is long lost. And so through a lot of sources, through his readings, he brings back that magical, through imagination, he brings back that feel for India, and because he had deep reverence for the spirit of the East. Now, he started to write a novel about India, which is Siddhartha, and he found it also difficult to compose because he was engaged in coming to terms with India, as he wrote, quote, Siddhartha, an Indian poem, required almost 4 years of effort. He began his book in 1919 and quickly wrote the first 4 chapters, which were published separately in the journal Neue Rundschau, RUNDSCHAU, Dschau, Nui Runsho. Then there came a break during which he wrote the story, and there was a break in these few chapters. It is the next 4 chapters. Then some time he found it very difficult to write. He found it unable to go on. But he did, however, struggled and suffered and completed the story. It was not until 1922 that after a complete revision of his views of India that Hesse was finally able to finish the last third of his novel and publish it in full. So Siddhartha is indeed the pinnacle of Hesse's Orientalism. Perhaps it is the highest point of his art as well. It is the culmination of that struggle for a new style which characterizes the author's most productive, most impressive period, the years 1916 to 1925, the years in which Hesse wrote and rewrote and reworked and suffered and struggled to find or bring in a new structure to his or new style to his writings, and also for his difficulty in writings. Several chapters were written beginning, and then he had to take a break, and then the next few chapters were written later. But this is considered as the pinnacle of his art, the high point of his art, the high pinnacle of Hesse's Orientalism, and one of the celebrated works as well. Now let's start the chapter-wise summary. One thing that you have to remember is the Siddhartha mentioned here. It says Siddhartha is not the Siddhartha Gautama that you have as a that is Buddha. Buddha also comes here as a character. Buddha will also be coming as a teacher, the Gautama, the real Gautama Buddha. But the Siddhartha whom Hesse is talking about is an ordinary Brahmin, a man similar to the nature, or quite similar to that of to the plot of Gautama Buddha, but not but he is not the Siddhartha, or he is not Buddha, he is Siddhartha. Okay, Siddhartha, so there are 2 characters, remember that. Okay, Siddhartha, the son of a Brahmin, at first seemed content to follow the pious Hindu's path to salvation through chastity. At the very beginning, his achievements are not inconsiderable. He understands the use of breathing exercise and knows how to pronounce Om, and knows that within him is the indestructible Atma, the soul, one with a Brahman, the universal, the one with Brahma, the universal soul. He burns with a longing for knowledge, and his father hopes of him that he will become a prince among Brahmins. But Siddhartha is soon dissatisfied with the rituals and the worships of gods. He wishes to find his way to experience the Atma, but to this no one can help him. The Upanishads merely bestow abstract knowledge. So he leaves home with his friend Govinda to join the Samanas, a sect of wandering ascetics.